Everyone hits a bump in the road. What do you do with it? Be inspired as we explore the ways people experience, navigate, and manage the ups and downs and twists and turns in this road trip called life. Welcome to another episode of Bump in the Road. The basic podcast is always free. We also have a premium subscription called Bump 2 that lets you listen in on extended behind-the-scenes conversations with our guests. Check it out at www.bumpintheroad.us. Paul Holman is doing something brilliant. When he recognized some of the intergenerational patterns in his own family, he decided they needed to change. In his quest for self-discovery, he discovered not just a way to transmute his family's legacy of anger, but to change it into a legacy of love. This is a terrific story about how we can all love more. Paul, welcome to Bump in the Road. If you would, tell us your story.
Thank you, Pat. I appreciate being with you today and being able to tell my story. I actually grew up in an angry family. Angry family or an angry culture looks like people talking over one another, people putting other people down so it elevates them, people yelling at one another, all sorts of social abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, just all sorts of abuses. And age 17, I said the same thing everybody at age 17 says, I'm not going to raise my children just like my parents did, especially if you didn't like what your parents did. And a lot of teenagers get to that point that they're teenagers. They don't want that thumb down on them, and they're going to make their own road. I wasn't any different. I moved out actually at age 17 after my junior year of high school and started living with my brother. He had two small children. I'm number 10 of 11 children, Pat. And so I didn't have an opportunity really to play with babies or to have younger siblings to play with. And so it was really kind of a fun thing to be in his household. He was a very loving father, but he still had the same attributes that possibly my grandfather or grandmothers had, and my father definitely had it, but he would stack annoyance on top of annoyance on top of annoyance and then have this flash of anger. Everybody was scared when that flash of anger, and we never know when that there was going to be that straw that would break the camel's back. It could be in public, it could be privately. We just didn't know when that flash of anger and those annoyances had stacked high enough that he'd have that flash of anger. I realized that after moving out there and having my own children, I also had that same pattern of that generational pattern of stacking those annoyances and having that flash of anger. And I realized early on, Pat, that that I wasn't hardly ever annoyed at myself. I thought I was fine. It was everybody else. It's all that everybody, why are they doing it that way? What's wrong with them? And I just had that angry feeling that I could do better than them. And it's just that putting myself above other people, still had that angry culture. And I realized that it took me a long time to realize that I got to stop blaming my father for all the things that happened in my childhood. Stop blaming people and stop laying responsibility on a lot of people. If you can blame someone, Pat, I found out, if you can blame someone for anything, you don't have to change. It's their fault. Go talk to them. They're the ones that need to change, and that's the dialogue that you kind of have in your mind when you're trying to be angry or trying to make a point. You never want to take responsibility, and it took me to age 35 to realize I'm responsible for my stuff. My father had been dead, passed away 7 years before my 35th birthday, and because of that, I realized that what am I doing? I'm blaming someone for my problems that's not even here to defend himself, not even here to talk to about that. And I realized I've got to make some changes. So as from that angry and negative and critical culture that I came from, I said, I don't want to be angry. It's like a double negative. And double negatives work really well in math if you want to have a positive outcome. You multiply two negative numbers together, you get a positive number. It doesn't work in relationships. It wasn't working for me. So I thought, well, I'll just try it, do what I can. And there came a point that this anger and these outbursts probably were contributory to the demise of my first marriage. I only had 8 children, Pat. just a lot less than my father that had 11, a lot less than my grandfather at 19. And my children only have 3 children. I want more grandchildren. I thought that's what we had children for, is to have the grandchildren. So anyway, I have eight children. After the divorce, there's only 5 left in the home, and I'm primary custodian. So during that primary custodian time, when it was my ex-wife's turn to have the children for the weekend, I decided I was going to have a fun time. I'm going to have this midlife crisis that like nobody else, and I was going to just make it just big. And I thought I'm going to try destination dating. And what destination dating is for your listeners, Pat, maybe you know what it is you pick a city. Someone is, whoever's online was in a different city. I was in a different city. We pick a city, we'd meet, we'd have a date, we'd go back home after that. So I was doing that, and I did it, had a great time traveling all over the United States, and then a little bit into Mexico for about a year and a half. I went to Daytona Beach and Jacksonville, Florida, Atlanta, Columbia, South Carolina, Charleston, Charlotte, North Carolina, New York City, Nashville, Kansas City, Salt Lake City, Phoenix, went to Snowflake, Arizona, Las Vegas, a lot of places, Cabo San Lucas, just went to all these places, having a great time in my life. But I realized after all that, Pat, I was looking for love in all the wrong places. This was just a temporary thing, and I just really didn't find anybody that I connected with. Well, I did find somebody I thought I connected with, ended up moving to the Phoenix area, and it just didn't work out. While I'm in Phoenix, my ex-wife decides now after 3.5 years of not having the children, she wanted the children back, the remaining 3 children that were in the home. Her plan was to move in with her parents. She's in her mid-40s, moving back home. I thought, well, that's a great opportunity for those last 3 children to really get to know their grandparents. So I relinquished custody. Now I'm all alone. My big sister calls me up and says, I've got a neighbor that I want to introduce to you. And, as number 10 of 11, you don't have a lot of say in the household anyway. I was, in the day, Pat, I was actually the human remote control. My legs were shorter. My brothers and my sister would say, your legs are close to the ground. You go up, walk up to the TV, turn the knob so we can change the channel. That's how we changed the channels in the day. And so that's what I would do. I was that guy. So I had to listen to what big brother and big sister say. And I said, sis, I don't want to do more destination dating. I just came off of that. I didn't find anything. I'm not interested. And as big sister would say, she said, oh, come on. And then I said, well, okay, I will email this person, this neighbor. And what kind of relationship can you develop, Pat, with an email? I didn't think it would materialize to anything, but actually, she was a pretty good writer. So after about 4 or 5 exchanges that way, from Phoenix to the St. George, Utah, after 4 or 5 exchanges like that, I got brave, Pat. I asked a question that you don't normally ask early on in a relationship. I said, how many times have you been married? And I wrote that in the email that we're sending back. And she writes back, counting the 5 that are buried in the backyard? And I roared with laughter. I think, I've got a live wire here. I've got somebody who's got some personality and a sense of humor. I'm going to pursue this. And it just drew me in a little bit, almost like a sales pitch. They just draw you in, and you're done. You're drawn in so far that it's a good sales tactic anyway. So I was drawn to her. I ended up moving from Phoenix to the St. George area, and we dated, became serious. Now it's time for big brother approval. Number 10 and 11, you need that as well. So we traveled 300 miles north of my brother's house. First thing that happened when we went inside that house, Pat, was that my sister-in-law pulls her aside and said, the only emotion that the Zolman family learned growing up was anger. At first I denied. I said, then it made me mad. And I punctuated exactly what she just said without even knowing it was almost like a knee-jerk reaction that I had from exactly what she said. And she's an outsider. She's an in-law. She said that, and I didn't realize at that time that that's really what was happening. And so from that actualization moment, I realized that I've got an opportunity right here and now to either change that perception of the Zolman family or continue with it. I thought, well, I want to change. I don't want that stigma to be with me. I don't want that to be with my children. I don't want to pass that on for more generations. Why can't I stop it right now? So I started reading the color code and reading the five love languages and settled on the five love languages. I love the principles of the love languages. Just Dr. Gary Chapman was a Baptist preacher, pastor, and he had mentioned that if you follow the love languages, you'll get closer to Jesus Christ. That Jesus Christ practiced these love languages. I'm a Christian, and I thought, that's kind of the direction. I think that would be a good direction to go. It's a great start. From where I came from, Pat, I didn't get it. You mean, Dr. Chapman, if I guess what Pat's love language is and I cater to that, we're going to be buddies? I'm a bad guesser. It wasn't working up until that time. It's not going to work now. And still wasn't working. So that wasn't working for me. And the second thing Dr. Chapman has, Pat, is that if you take this survey, you can find out what your love language is. Well, what the heck are you supposed to do with that? Advertise? Hello, Pat. I'm gifts. What do you have for me today? It's so awkward. And it's just really awkward to say, this is how I want to be loved. And what if they don't do it? Then you get to this pity party voice that says, well, I told you how to love me. Why aren't you doing it? And it was just an unintended pity party. I did not want to even go there. So I thought, you know what? As dysfunctional as our family was growing up, we played games together. And when we played games, it was kind of like a family. It was cohesive and everything. There was still all the smack talk, all the put downs, all the aggressive competition. But we were together. So I thought, what if I could make this a game? So I contacted Dr. Chapman and asked him, are you licensing those little icons, the little pictures that you have for each one of the love languages? Because I was going to make it a game. And his attorney wrote back after a couple of weeks and said, no, we're not doing that right now at this time. So I thought, well, I think it's still a good idea. I had a friend in the neighborhood that was a copyright attorney, an intellectual property attorney. And I went to him and told him my idea. And he told me this. He said, theory, like the love language theory, is not copyrightable. Application is. So how you present it is copyrightable. They weren't doing it as a game. So I thought, well, I'll make it a game. So my first prototype of the game was just a huge 2.5-inch block of wood that I engraved the different icons on, so I would know what love language to practice that particular day. It was really had a lot of sharp edges, as you can see. As you know, I cut it really sharp, and when you rolled it, if you put what you wanted on top, and it will go thunk 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 thunk, and you knew it would do 4 thunks, you'd have what you wanted. It was like a weighted dice. It really wasn't working very well at all. But I was trying to work on my own artwork, Pat, and it took 2 years to get my own artwork. The next prototype, obviously, I rounded the edges a little bit so it would roll a lot better. And I've been rolling that ever since that time. So started in 2015, 2017, actually got copyright on this. This is the artwork and the dice. It's about 1 inch by 1 inch. You can see here I've got hands holding objects. This one is holding an hourglass. The hourglass represents time, just spending time with one another. My wife loves this love language, and the way she likes it expressed is she likes me to sit with her while she's watching Korean dramas. They don't speak English. It's all subtitles. We can't talk, so it's just quiet time, but just spending time with her. It's her favorite way to spend time right now. The next one I have, it looks like a waiter holding a platter. That platter represents service. So this would be service. These people that like service like their car washed. They like the carpet vacuum. They like the trash taken out. They like help with the laundry. They like help with the dishes. Those are people that love service. Some of us like service all the time. But the next one I'm holding is the hands put together to create a heart. But it's a little bit different than the hearts that you see with Taylor Swift and others that are doing the hearts like this. This one has a little conversation flyout. This conversation flyout represents that these are the words of the heart. These would be the I love yous or the compliments that you send out each day. The next side has two hands touching one another. That's obviously touch. And then the last one is a hand holding a gift, representing gifts. Five love languages. There's six sides on the cube. The last side is a hand holding a question mark. That represents, I've named that side surprise me. So, Pat, there's just two instructions. You roll the dice every day. Whatever it lands on, that's the love language you send out or give away all day that day. All day to everyone. Pat, just as I've mentioned, I was single when I created this. I said, Dr. Chapman, who in the heck am I supposed to love? I don't have a significant other. And I said, oh, I guess I just get to love everybody. And it was perfect for me. I needed a replacement behavior. Instead of being annoyed and critical and focusing on what other people were doing wrong, I needed a behavior that said, how can I love them? What are they doing right? As I pondered a little bit more about this, I realized that I was focused on maybe 10 to 20% of the faults or weaknesses of a person and missing the 80 to 90% of the good of that person. Absolutely missing the good parts of that person. So once I started rolling the die on a regular basis, Pat, that paradigm shift, it was an about face. One time I'm focusing left, the other time I'm focusing right. And as I'm focusing toward love, I'm focusing on what's right about them. I'm not annoyed anymore. I don't have time to be annoyed. And it cured me. It actually was an overnight miracle that I was able to move away from being critical about people to actually being positive and uplifting, helping people on their way. That's my story. I'm sticking to it.
Wow. Part of it too is a movement from being externally oriented to internally oriented, because you're oriented now towards giving love in some way, some shape or form, as opposed to being externally oriented and critical or judgmental.
Exactly. And it's interesting that you say that too, because when naming this, you roll the dice outside of you, ROLL, but I named it roll of love, ROLE, which is internal. It's actually a change that happens within as well. A very good, very perceptive, pick up on that.
Well, I think your journey is so interesting because we all have these familial intergenerational traits. And until we look at them and become conscious of them, they just keep playing out again and again. I see it all the time in people. And I try and I work hard to be conscious of my own and to transform my own habits. But I look around and I see, and I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but I see so many people who are just caught up in these plays and they're utterly unaware of what they're doing.
I agree with that, and I think that this tool really helped me be aware of what was right about people, where previously I was focused on what's wrong with them. And just that paradigm shift, everybody has faults. And I like to compare it, Pat, to a magnifying glass. Whatever you magnify or whatever you focus on is going to get larger. It's absolutely going to get larger. Why would you want the mistakes of another? If you're annoyed already, why would you want the mistakes of another to get larger? I mean, think about that. And we're not thinking about it is the problem. We're not thinking that far down the road. We just have this flashes of anger and we just go to the rage, or it may escalate to rage. It's unfortunate. It's very unfortunate. I think as we magnify the good that people are doing and have that grow, that we're going to have a whole lot better society somewhere down the road.
Oh, absolutely. And I think recognizing that we're all shades of gray, no one's entirely good or entirely bad. We're actually much more interesting than that.
Oh, I absolutely agree. But I think we're intrinsically a whole lot more good than we are bad, and that's the whole idea. Focus on that. Focus on the majority of that person. Focus on what's right about that person. Forget it. Forget the weaknesses. Forget their faults. They'll go away by themselves or not. But focus on what's good and just build that up. And you got to be genuine about it. It's not flattery. We're not talking about flattery. We're not talking about complimenting someone so that they're so sugary that they become sick and get a sugar high. We're not talking about that at all. We're talking about being genuine, being authentic in the words that we use to help people see traits that are really good that maybe they didn't see themselves. I've had that happen a lot of times, but oh, I didn't realize that about myself. Thank you for noticing that about me.
That's really nice. I know I often find something I like about somebody and compliment them on it. It might be a bracelet they're wearing. It could be something very simple or small. But in doing that over the years, I've realized very few people give compliments.
We need to change that. That's what we're here. Yeah, and I like to call it, Pat. I like to call it raising the standard of loving. You always hear about raising the standard of living. Like to just let's raise the standard of loving and get to that love literacy. When I'm talking literacy and I'm talking about the five love languages, what happened for me is that I read the book 4 or 5 times. I didn't get it. I didn't. If somebody offered me $1 million to name all five love languages after reading through it 4 or 5 times, I probably would not win that $1 million. What happened when I started rolling the die and practicing giving it away, though, is that it became part of me. It actually was part of me. I was going through the book, but the book wasn't going through me. Rolling the die actually brought this to a point of action that now, over a 30-day period, I had given away all five love languages. I knew it backwards and forwards. I could name them all after that 30-day period of time. The best part about that for me, Pat, was that now I can recognize it also when it comes my way. Dr. Chapman says that everybody has a primary or possibly a secondary love language as well. And we tend to give away what we like, hoping that it'll be reciprocated in that way. I see that as a transaction. It's not real love. When we send love out, we send it out without any expectation of it ever coming back, but trusting the laws of the universe that were before you and I were ever born. The law of the harvest, or karma, or law of attraction, whatever you want to call it, it says basically that whatever you send out, someday is coming right back to you. Why would you send anger out and have it come back to you? That's a boomerang that, as the boomerang gets some height, and and gravity is going to bring that back with a lot more velocity. It could be 10 times or 100 times worse coming back to you than you ever sent it out. Put the love in the bank, send out love, and just build that bank account so that that love will come back to you someday. Doesn't matter when. It might not be by that person, and most likely won't be through that person that you're sending the love out to, because you're sending it out indiscriminately to every person. Everybody's a person now. We don't need that diversity anymore. Everybody is an individual. Everybody deserves love. Everybody needs that caring. Send it out.
Did you find that you expanded your own comfort zone in both giving and receiving these different types of love?
Oh, absolutely. It's a great question, Pat. Nobody's ever asked me about that. But I think that the comfort zone was is like Dr. Chapman says, you feel comfortable giving away what you like. When I it was there was a lot of discomfort as I'm and through the learning curve of giving away something different that I'd not given away before, like spending time. Oh, I might be twiddling my thumbs. What am I going to do? How am I supposed to spend time with someone? And you really don't have that mindset of how am I going to do that until you start doing it. And then you start getting a feel for what that looks like and how people respond to that. So it really changed a lot in that way, that it just developed my sensitivity to sending it out and receiving it, but it also developed the skill set that I needed. These are basic laws, Pat. Basic fundamentals is how I'm actually saying it right now, because these are the stair steps of kindness on top of kindness on top of kindness on top of kindness. That same stacking effect that I have with the annoyances, you can do with the kindnesses to get to the higher laws of love, like compassion or charity or intimacy or forgiveness or mercy or empathy or sympathy or trust. Those are higher laws of love. These are basic. This is a literacy level that everybody needs to have, Pat, throughout the world. We need these basics so that we can stair step and stack like those annoyances I was stacking. Instead of stacking annoyances, stack those kindnesses to get to those higher laws.
That is so interesting because what you're describing is experiential learning. And that's actually how we really learn and grow, particularly on a personal or even spiritual level. We have to understand it. Like I often say, you can't give comfort to somebody till you give comfort to yourself. You can't give, can't give love to somebody until you give love to yourself. And going through all those different types of love languages and experiencing each one alone is a massive paradigm shift in terms of how you see and interact and understand people.
Absolutely. And when you can have that paradigm shift, it really changes your life. It changes your whole outlook is a lot brighter. What you're watching for and what I watch for as I'm rolling the die and practicing whatever genre of love that I rolled for that day, what I'm watching for is for people to light up. When they light up, now you don't have to say, "Excuse me, could we pause this relationship for a moment while I have you take this survey so I know how to love you?" You don't have to do that anymore, Pat. There no more awkward. Just watch. Use your skills of attunement to be able to observe what lights them up. When you do that, you've discovered what their primary or secondary love language is. And for that person, you may want to make a mental note and wash, rinse, and repeat. But it's not like we're trying to put people back in that survey box. We're not doing that. We're not doing the putting them in the box so that they have to eat tacos every day of their life, every meal of their life for the rest of their life, just because they told us they like service. They don't have to do that. So we're changing the menu, we're adding variety to it, and this variety is really the spice of life. This we're looking for people that are being creative about how they send out love.
And you're fostering greater awareness and presence in doing all that too.
Absolutely. And I think that we really need to take this to the children too. And I'm testing it right now in some school systems, Pat. I've got a K through 6 is the kind of the range that I'm testing it in. But at the beginning of the day, they'll roll the class, either the teacher or maybe the teacher will pick a student to roll the die at the beginning of the day. Takes less than 2 seconds. The teacher then, maybe for 30 or 45 seconds, say, "Class, this is the type of behavior we're looking for, or this is what that type of behavior would look like today." At the end of the day, the kids they're tired. They've been studying all day. Their brains are mush. They know they're antsy. They know the bell's going to ring. That last 10 to 15 minutes of the day, Pat, I've talked with teachers around the world. It's totally non-productive time. Let's make it productive time. So created a PDF of a journal page so they can record what they rolled, opportunities they saw to love in that way, what they did about those opportunities. So now these children at age 6 and 7, 8 and 9, now they're responsible. And they know they're responsible because whatever they roll at the beginning of the day, they know they have to write about it at the end of the day. They have to report. And the teacher just puts a check mark. They make uh, does a check mark. Then the teacher sends it back with the child back home. The astute parents will put those in chronological order, and then at the end of that first grade or the end of that third grade, they'll put it together. Now you have a journal for that child for first grade or third grade or fifth grade. You've got a love journal. I would have loved to have a love journal from first grade myself. I remember my first grade teacher's name, Mrs. Rogers. She was the kindest person. She was elderly to me. She was very elderly. She was probably in her 60s and probably ready to retire. I think she only taught for a couple more years after she taught my first grade class. But I remember it was a different feeling in the classroom than it was at home. And I just loved that feeling. It must have been love, or there must have been something in that classroom that I loved about Mrs. Rogers. Even as old as she was seemed almost like a grandma to me. But my parents were pretty old too when I'm I mean, I'm number 10 of 11. So they were really old, but they seemed really old to me. But it's just, there's something about that journal writing that decompresses that child at that end of the day. It's a decompression activity to write in a journal. You don't want them wound up, sending them home from school all wound up. This will help in that regard. The second thing that happens is that if they know they have to be responsible for their behavior, they're not going to be out there bullying. They're not going to be out there doing violence. They're not going to be out there doing anything like that because they know they have to report about it, or it'll tamp it down quite a bit. There'll still be some that have that generational thing that that's what their father did, that's what their grandfather did, and that they were the bullies, and they're just passing it on. And it's just something until they say stop. We're not doing that anymore for themselves. They have to say it for themselves. Unless they say that, it may continue on. But we're just really trying to mitigate that and trying to raise up a generation that knows the love languages, that's literate in that, knows how people like to use, knows how to light up people, try to assist people, to uplift them. And if we can create a generation like that in the grade schools, hopefully that'll transfer to the junior high, to the high schools, to the college, and to their life. And we'll have a new generation that comes up soon.
Where can people find your cube and information on this process?
It's a great question, Pat. It's just the name of the product is Roll of Love, ROLE of Love. So rolloflove.com is where they can find the cube, the book, and the journal. I've got it on sale right now. It's about 20% off the rack price. It's at $29.99. It's a whole lot less than just one therapy session, and it's going to last you a whole lot longer.
Thank you for listening. I hope you'll support this podcast by becoming a Bump 2 subscriber. Buy us a cup of coffee. It's your support that makes this podcast and website possible. I hope you found something in today's podcast that inspires you along your own life's path, because sometimes a bump in the road is actually a portal into a more conscious and meaningful life.